In this video I'm going to take you through all the settings and the type of gear that I use for skip casting soft plastic lures for mangrove jack, barra and even bass. And I'm going to take you through a couple of the tips that I've got for techniques and things like that to get your skip casting going so that you can catch a few more fish, especially in those pressured waters or in gorgeous country like this where you've got big overhangs and heaps of cover. If you haven't seen the videos I've been doing in the last few months around skip casting, make sure you check them out. I'll put them in the link below, and I'll put a couple of options at the end of this video. But before we get into it, take a look at some of the crazy action that's going to happen if you get your skip casting going. He's taken with one of these skipping plastics. Oh, it's so effective just getting it in hard up in under those mangroves. And he just slammed it so hard. Been skip casting these little paddle tail plastics in. Right, so the lures that I like to use are these shad style plastics, and anywhere from a 3.5 inch little herring shape or a shad style plastic with a paddle tail on the back is going to work for you. And I'll use them for bass. Eco Gear bolts or RT shads, they come in a 3.5, and there's a 4.5 that I love for jacks. And then things like these Storm 360 GT coastals are good. There's a whole range of stuff, fish arrows. I've done reviews on these fish arrow J shads lately, and they're just fantastic on barra and jacks. And that's what I'll use. You want a lot of body in the lure that you're flicking and skipping. Little things like skinny trick swims or worm baits, they're just too skinny to get your skip casting going, especially if you're learning. Soft plastic frogs and things like that are really good if you're just learning, especially floating ones like the ones that Z-Man make. But the way that I do it when I'm chasing jacks is usually with a weedless weighted worm hook. And these hooks, I get them out of the Savage Gear Manic Shrimp. And I keep the plastic because they're not too bad on jacks and barra themselves. But when I'm flicking these paddle tail plastics, they're the weights that I like to use. And they're a Gamakatsu hook, but you can't get them in Australia at the moment. Hopefully I can organise so that someone starts bringing them in. But at the moment you've got to send to the States for them, or you can get them out of those Savage Gear Manic Shrimp. And they're about, I think they're either a 1/4 ounce or anywhere up to an 1/8 is good for chasing jacks and barra. You want a little bit of weight so it just gets down under the surface and it allows you to fire it in and get plenty of skipping going. But you don't want to go too heavy, and you want the weight forward for the most part so that when it's skipping it's flying in head first. So that's the stuff that I use. And the other thing is there's a little twist lock that runs at the front of this thing. You might be able to see that there now that it's getting a little bit worn and chundered up. These twist locks, you can just get them on eBay. And Bite Me Tackle do them in bags of like 50 and 100. And there's a couple of different sizes, but they're like $4 for a whole bag of them. So they last forever. The gear that I'm running is for jacks is 20-pound braid with a 20-pound leader. And then just a low profile bait casting reel. And the settings that I run on this, it's really loose. So if you have a look with the plastic, watch this. So the plastic just wants to fall under the cast control that I run on there. And then the magnetic cast control on this side, I only have like one or none of the weights in there, like the little plastic cast controls. You can see that there's only one out. And I'll either run one or none. Basically what you want is the thing really loose so that when you start skipping, and I'll show you, when you start skipping you can just fire these things in and the plastic will just start to shoot across the surface for you. And that's the whole concept, is that you can fire a weedless bait rigged right up deep in undercover and get into spots where the jacks are aggressive, the bass and the barra are ready to feed, and they think they've got an advantage. It's very natural for them to be feeding hard in against the cover. And so that's what you're trying to do. The rod that I use it's just a Shimano, like an Ian Miller Bass Raider. You can see that, hopefully you can pick up some of the text there, but it's a 510 Bass Raider, which is like a one-piece It's like 5'6" if you have a look at it, or 5'10", yeah. So it's a 5'10", 3 to 6 kilo bass raider. And the reason why I use it for jacks and barra is it's pretty light, to be honest. You can see the flex in the top sort of 30 or 40% of the blank. That allows you to load up your plastic and allows you to load and skip it in. So the technique that I use, it's like skipping a rock when you're a kid, and you sort of underarm throw it like that, and when you get good you can backhand it underneath. But essentially you're trying to track the surface of the water with your rod tip 5 or 10 centimeters above the surface of the water in a pirouette like that. And when you're finishing your cast with a bait caster as well, it just helps if you lift your rod tip up and just get rid of any slack line and finish the spool run with a lift. And that's what I find helps, just to stop you getting overrun. So when I'm throwing it in there, my rod tip's sort of finishing up there, and that just gives you a little bit of grace. A shorter rod too, the guys in the States that have got this dialed in really well, they'll use longer rods, a lot of them in the States when they're chasing bass. But I just find a shorter rod was easier for me to learn because I don't have such a high sort of rod tip speed, so I can slowly get my arm going with it, and that way I'm just a little bit more confident that I'm not going to overthrow it. And the benefit of a really short rod too when you get going is that your accuracy is a lot better than using a longer rod. So when you're chasing jacks, accuracy, even bass and barra, accuracy is really key. And that's one of the big things, the biggest tip I've got for people getting into jack fishing is their casting accuracy needs to be down. So that's why I use that shorter rod. So really light settings on your reel, and most of the work is done with your thumb. And you're basically just feathering and thumbing it in, and it's just a practice thing. The same as skipping a rock was when you're a little fella, was just a lot of practice to get as many skips as you could. It's exactly the same sort of patience you need to be able to get this down. But my God, when you get it going, the action that you're going to find is just insane. It's heart-wrenching stuff. And you spend hours out on the water, the whole time your heart's in your mouth waiting, because it feels like the very next cast is going to be that one, because you're right in there all the time, deep in cover, which people don't usually get. So you're fishing water and catching fish that people don't see very often. So it's going to help your catch rates, and it's a really fun, kind of an arty way of fishing really, and that's why I love it. There's a lot of enjoyment out of getting your casting going and being able to fire it in and really work an area in a system, work it over harder than what's usually getting hit. So if you've got any questions on this, make sure just leave the comments in the section below, and if you like the video, just put a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you do that. I've got heaps more content coming in the next few weeks, and if you've got a question, yeah, just hit me up and I'll get back to you, and hopefully this little clip's going to help you get your skip casting going and help you catch a few more fish. I'll see you in the next video.